Assalamu alaikum dears, and greetings to all of you. Welcome dears to this video. I would be delighted to introduce an informative and quick session in this channel, which focuses on Islamic finance insights. Please support us by subscribing and following upcoming videos. So, let's start our session. The risk sharing. Sharing of investment risks by the capital owner is projected continually since the turn of the century as the definitional postulate of Islamic finance. The frequency of assertion is on the increase after the demonstration, rather inconclusive, that Islamic banks faced the 2007 financial turmoil better than the mainstream banks that promote risk transfer, not sharing. The postulate did not go unchallenged. However, instead of answering the queries raised, the proponents choose to blow their trumpets louder, more frequently. The postulate is highly restrictive. If capital faces the risk of shrinkage, workers risk their limbs and lives while working on machines, apart from health hazards they face manning, for instance, the burning furnaces or oil rigs in the open seas. Soil erosion can render land less fertile at no fault of the owner, and the managers may have reduced leisure. The point is that all factors of production are exposed to some sort of risk, and their risks are neither measurable nor comparable. Furthermore, does Islam always disallow pre-fixed return on investment under all circumstances? Are the profit-sharing schemes entirely free of risk transfer? Are they invariably equitable? Or is the interest-based financing entirely risk-free? Questions of the sort remain unanswered, but must be answered. To begin with, the postulate is based on a rather restrictive interpretation of a leading Islamic maxim derived from a prophetic tradition. It says, "Benefit goes with liability." The problem here is with the proponent's interpretation of the word liability in the statement as the bearing of risk in financial transactions. Islam does count profit and loss sharing contracts among the valid modes of financing. But risk-bearing is a consequence, not the cause, of such contracts. To put it straight, there is no such thing in Islam as a risk-sharing contract that, when entered into, would result in the sharing of profit or loss. Liability in the maxim focuses on compensation, not on risk, for risk is not a tradable commodity. Risk-taking per se cannot contribute to production. This is why gambling is banned in Islam. Ownership of useful things, including capital contribution to production, deserves a reward. Equity of a profit share can be better judged with reference to capital investment, not with reference to risk. The contention finds support from another Islamic maxim. Liability accompanies gain. The maxim is derived from the Quran. Those who swallow usury will not rise, except as someone driven mad by Satan's touch. That is because they say, commerce is like usury. But God has permitted commerce, and has forbidden usury. Whoever, on receiving advice from his Lord, refrains may keep his past earnings, and his case rests with God. But whoever resume are the dwellers of the fire wherein they will abide forever. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:275. There has to be compensation for receiving a gain. Thus, for a claim to profit, a financier is liable to bear ex post loss, not the ex ante risk. Conventional finance is of course dominated by interest-based transactions, but it is far from the truth that it never entails risk sharing. Equity holders share risk, and equity dominates in long-term financing. Even when loans are advanced on interest, banks face the risk of default and of adverse price movements in collaterals. That banks collapsed like a house of cards in the 2007 turmoil is evidence enough to see that interest-based finance is not always or entirely risk-free. Likewise, Islamic banks do transfer risk via hedging contracts. They also take collateral to cover default risks. The bulk of transactions Sharia supervisors approve are debt-based. Participatory finance, despite all efforts and pleadings, is still not popular. The valid distinction between Islamic and conventional finance is not that one is entirely risk-sharing and the other is entirely risk-transferring. The deciding factor is their proportion in the mix. Furthermore, it is not true that Islam bans risk transfer. It is a matter of interpretation. Banning interest does not imply an automatic ban on risk transfer. Indeed, there is an argument that in pure classical mudaraba where the worker-entrepreneur is empty-handed, the financier transfers a part of his risk to the worker. The financier does not make any payment to him in case of loss. He reduces his own loss equal to the transfer earnings of the worker. In a way, risk is in part passed on to him. Likewise, risk-sharing need not always be equitable. Presumably, it is rarely so. Risk being ex ante has no cardinal measure. The sharing ratio is a crude proxy for the division of profit. No one can demonstrate a one-to-one correspondence between the profit share of the parties and their risk exposures. Justice and fair play are the first requirements for calling something Islamic. The difficulty is that tons of juristic writings analyzing contract forms provide little help to determine whether or not there is injustice in the exchange contract. Arbitrariness rules. Furthermore, Islam grants payment for owning factors of production, land, labor, and capital, contributing to the output of permissible goods. It does not tie payments to risk that all factors face in the course of production in some form and measure. Moreover, it allows many fixed payments like salaries, rental, fees, commissions that entail no risk. On the other hand, it disallows others infected with much risk, like those laced with gharar, chance games, smuggling, theft and trading in non-halal goods. Finally, it is incorrect that the mainstream banks remain immune to risk, or always transfer them to other parties. The history of financial crises testifies that the giant mainstream banks and insurance companies crumbled like sand walls in storms that occasionally swept across the globe. In this point we reach to the end of today's session. I hope that this video provided an informative and quick session. If you are interested in this area, kindly subscribe in the channel because we are planning to provide deep information as well as the latest reports and news about Islamic finance. We look forward to your subscribing, your like, as well as your suggestions in the comments. Have a good time and best regards.